What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Football from Up North podcast. This is going to be our Week 14 waiver wire episode. So, riding solo once again, is myself, Clayton. So, you know what? Without further ado, let's just jump into it. Quick thing I want to talk about real quick is our partnership with 247 Clash Daily Fantasy Sports Entertainment. This is just a great site in general. 247 Clash is a DFS site. It's player versus player based on fantasy points. So basically, you're given a line every week, probably, whatever amount of games, 13 or so, whatever games it is, you're going to be playing player versus player based on their fantasy points. And you know what? Each week, everybody has a chance to win the pot. If it's the most picks correct wins. So there could be multiple winners. And the biggest thing was with this format, they're taking away the professionals' advantage instead of giving everybody a chance to win the pot. So I mean, what better way is that? You just get on there, pick your best, pick what you think's going to win, and kind of give it a shot that way. So it costs $5 to enter. You can box them up, meaning if there's a game that you're very, on the fence about, you double your bet. You box that game. That means you win both. You win either way. So head over to www.247clash.com. Sign up using referral code NORTH. Make your first deposit. Start playing now. Usually the pools are posted up on Wednesday night. So once again, www.247clash.com. Referral code NORTH. Make your first deposit and play with us now. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into this Week 14 waiver wire episode that we got here. 6 teams on bye. We got Atlanta, Chicago, New Orleans, Green Bay, Indianapolis, and Washington. Touch on a few. I should have had this picked up already. Sorry. Talk about some injuries. There was some big name injuries last week, or on Sunday, pardon me. So I'll go through those real quick. Got Lamar Jackson, left knee sprain, week to week, most likely out week 14, targeting week 16 return. So if you're, that's a big hit. I mean, especially if you're fighting for a fantasy spot, pardon me, if you're fighting for a fantasy spot in playoffs, that's a big hit for you. Hopefully you have someone depth on there. I do have a guy that I'm going to talk about in a waiver wire show that could be a possible fill-in for a few weeks to get you over that hump. So Ken Walker, right ankle injury, basically questionable for week 14. Jimmy Garoppolo, right foot fracture, season-ending injury, unfortunately. That's a big hit to this team. I mean, this team looked dominant yesterday. And that's with Purcell running the show. So hopefully they go back to Purcell. I thought he did a great job, playing against that number one defense all season long anyways. So he did what he needed to do. I really hope that they don't kick the tires on Baker Mayfield. So Joe Mixon, concussion protocol still questionable for week 14. And really that's the biggest ones that I have on tap here for right now. Aaron Jones, there was an injury there as well. I believe that one is also he's going to be questionable going into the week. Tua ankle injury probable for week 4. Waddle leg injury probable. Treylon Burks concussion protocol. He was about to go off on Sunday. Unfortunately, he got a concussion. Cortland Sutton hamstring strain. I'm not counting on him this week. Hayden Hurst right calf injury. DJ Dallas ankle injury. So this backfield, the Seattle backfield, is just banged up right now. And then we were talking about Foster Moreau. He was a last minute scratch, but it looks like he's going to be out again this week because the Raiders play on Thursday night. So let's jump into these five main guys that I do like right now. Number one, I'm going to go with James Cook for the Bills. 23% rostered. We've seen Cook have productive weeks, back-to-back games. Thursday night, played one fewer snap than Devin Singletary. However, if you look at the game as a whole, and if we're looking at all the stat line, he ran more routes than Singletary, saw a bigger target share in the passing game, and also had more carries. So, as a whole, that's exactly what you want to see out of James Cook. To me, he seems like he's going to be the guy at some point. He finished the game with over 60 yards rushing on 14 carries, added another 6 catches for another 41 yards. So 100, just over 100 total yards. And although Singletary is clearly the goal line back, that's the only downside to this. But Cook's receiving ability alone makes him a must add, in my opinion. He's a solid flex play this week against the Jets. And to be honest, this late in the season, I'm using all my fab money on a guy like James Cook, especially if I lost guys like Ken Walker, maybe Aaron Jones if he's been struggling, and so on and so forth. So the next guy I have on my list is tight end Greg Dulcich. I think that's how you say his name, for the Broncos, 37% owned. We saw his percentage dip a little bit. I have a feeling that has mostly to do with the he had 2 games where he was just absolutely horrendous the last 2 weeks. So um comes out last week. Sorry, last 3 weeks, he's combined for a total of 12 fantasy points. So, I mean, he really bounced back on Sunday, finished the game with 6 catches for 85 yards on 8 targets, put up just over 14 fantasy points in PPR. And now, like I mentioned earlier before, Cortland Sutton banged up. Most likely he's going to be missing some time. I think Dolchich should see plenty of targets next week against the Chiefs defense. It's allowing the 8th most fantasy points to the tight end position. So, I mean, those targets that Sutton was getting have to go somewhere. Judy's still banged up. You got KJ Hamler that's not going to be back. I mean, this Broncos team is just in shambles right now. I mean, they got Latavius Murray running the backfield, and they're basically their top receiver is going to be their tight end in Dolchich. So, moving forward now, if we look at the fantasy playoffs, the Broncos' next 2 opponents, week 15 and 16, are also very favorable matchups. The Cardinals second, they give up the second most fantasy points allowed, and then the Rams the 21st most. So, especially after you got 3 weeks in a row that you're going to be able to use Dolchich as a tight end 1, and if he's available, he's a must add and startable from this point on. So put all your fab on a guy like him as well. Another guy who makes you want to puke in my mouth a little bit, Cam Akers of the Rams, 45% rostered. I mean, when we think Akers is done, he just pops off. Ever like that? I mean, all we really heard about all last week. I mean, any waiver wire episodes you're listening to, I think we mentioned it on ours as well. Any waiver wire article, we're talking about Kyron Williams taking over that backfield, but Cam Akers dominated in touches in week 13. Finished the week with over 60 yards rushing on 2 touchdowns on 17 carries. Huge carries for Akers. The only downside to Akers is that he's not being used in the passing game. However, with all the injuries at the running back position, like we mentioned, Ken Walker, DJ Dallas, Aaron Jones, you name it, there's a bunch of injuries right now. You could use Akers as a RB3 with RB2 upside moving forward. I think this offense, this Rams offense moves a lot better, a lot smoother with Wolford back there. I do feel as though Wolford has gives the Rams a better chance to, especially for fantasy managers, better chance to produce fantasy wise than I can't remember what his name is now, but anyways, they're backup. So I'd throw 10 to 15% of my fab on him this week. Nico Collins, now another guy, Nico Collins of the Houston Texans, talked about him, touched on him a little bit last week. And he's still available in almost 70% of Yahoo leagues. So, I mean, if we look at it, if we look at this, he led the team in snaps, targets, and routes ran on Sunday as well. Gathered Cooks was out of this game. However, Collins has been doing this, leading the team in snaps, targets, and routes ran all through, even with Cooks on the field. So, I mean, this is again, he was targeted 10 times, only caught 3 of those passes, but he did get in the end zone. So, I mean, obviously that helped his fantasy numbers a little bit. He has now 4 straight games with almost 10 PPR fantasy points. So, for a wide receiver 3-4, not bad, in my opinion. As a flex play, I think you'll take that all day. We know that the Texas team isn't very good. Let's be real. They're going to be playing catch up a lot. And I mean, Collins has seen a healthy amount of targets every game. So I think he can be used, like I mentioned, a serviceable wide receiver 3/4 every week. Probably throw about 3 to 5% of your fab on them. It should be enough to get Collins this week. Nobody's really looking. I think that's the problem. Nobody's really looking um at Collins because of the fact is you got your um because the Texas suck. Like let's be real. I mean that's my team on top of that. So I mean I'm guilty too. I have him on very little amount of teams that I have, but I am going to try to get him on a few more because now that I start seeing this production weekly, it's those kind of it's these kind of players that you need now while you're in fantasy. If you make it in the fantasy playoffs, because injuries happen, you want to get a jump on these guys with upside, and he's definitely one of those guys that could do that for you. Uh, Another guy I'll touch on real quick is the guy I mentioned at the top of the show. If you did lose Garoppolo, Jared Goff, Detroit Lions, 50% rostered. He's averaged over 16 fantasy points per game this season. He's currently the QB 17 on the year, but over the past 2 weeks, however, Goff is averaging almost 20 fantasy points and now has a great rest of season schedule to look forward to. They got the Vikings, which you could throw on the Jets, a little bit more difficult, but should be all right, and then Panthers and the Bears. So I mean, if you're streaming quarterbacks, Goff is a must add. If you lost Garoppolo or if you just need some help at the position, Goff's a must add. Um, they face the Vikings this week. That they're allowing the sixth most fantasy points to quarterbacks. That just allowed Mike White to torch them for over 370 against them on Sunday. So I mean, Goff is getting these weapons back. He's getting Williams back. DJ Chark stepping it up right now. Um, you got Amon St. Brown. That's just solid. You know, top probably top 7 option right now. I think this Detroit Lions team is going to put up fantasy points every week. Cause I mean, all they do is score really. So, Goff's a worthy streaming option. I'm throwing at least 50% of my fab on him. But if, like I said, if you're down Garoppolo, you don't be shy and throw everything down on him to try to get him. So couple other options. Those are my top 5 ads this week. I mean, they're not super, super standout names, but those are the top 5 guys that I was looking at in depth, I guess you could say. I do got a bunch of other names here that I'll throw it at you. First one's going to be Bam Knight. Zonovan Knight for the Jets. He's still only 47% owned. He was a bell cow on Sunday. I mean, he finished with 20 touches for almost 120 total yards, and that included 5 catches. Now they were talking about, James Robinson there, Ty Johnson. Knight out-touched those guys 15-5. So, even when Carter does come back, I still do think that Knight has done enough these last 2 weeks that he's kind of carved himself out a nice role when Carter does return, especially in that passing game. And the Jets have a great matchups in the fantasy playoffs. So I mean, I'm adding Knight if he's still out there, and just in case he does somehow take that job away from Carter, or maybe they just shut Carter down because Knight's doing just that well. So another guy I mentioned earlier. Well, I wrote this article earlier, but I did have DJ Dallas there. Split touches with Tony Jones. So let's just switch this over to Tony Jones because I think he's the only healthy running back on this team. So Tony Jones looks like he's going to be. I'm not sure if it's going to be a must add. I would take just keep an eye on these practice reports. Travis Homer could be back, but I know he's been battling with injuries as well. So yeah, but I mean, if Dallas is good to go, I mean, he should see 10 plus touches a game. Can be flexed during the time that Walker is out, especially next week against the Panthers. So take a look at him. He's only 3% owned. Jordan Mason, now the 49ers running back, rushed 8 times for over 50 yards. Very impressive. And he's clear cut backup to CMC. I mean, he should be seeing 8 to 10 touches a game. And I'm stash him now just in case something does happen to CMC. We know he's been kind of battling an injury as of late. And the fact the Niners have a very favorable matchup for fantasy playoffs is another reason why you probably want to stash him. And I mentioned him in the same sentence I talked about Jared Goff, DJ Chark, 16% owned. Even with Williams coming back, Chark's still a streaming option with those 6 teams that I mentioned that are on bye. Caught 5 balls for almost 100 yards on Sunday and should be rostered, especially for this week's matchup against the Vikings. They've been torched by receivers all year. So I mean, if you need a guy, go and get him. A couple other guys I'll just throw out there briefly that I didn't really touch on, maybe a little bit deeper if you're looking, is a guy like Johan Dotson for the Commanders. I mean, they're on a bye this week, but he's clearly stepping up to be that, number two target for behind Terry McLaurin. And he's just got big playability. So, I mean, every week he's got flex appeal. So, um, the schedule, however, is not the greatest after this week's bye. They got the Giants, 49ers, and Browns. But, if you're in a deeper league, still worth grabbing. Talked about Donovan Peoples-Jones last week. He's still available in almost 45% of leagues. Very favorable matchup. I would imagine that idiot quarterback they got will get on pace with these guys. He did look really rusty last week. I'm not going to say his name because I don't like the guy. Piece of shit. But anyways, once he does get, back on the same page with these guys, I do think that Peoples-Jones, is going to go nothing, but his production is going to go upwards. So another one, Isaiah McKenzie, very good on Thursday night. He had a big week 12 game. And then he came up with 5 catches on 5 targets for 44 yards in week 13. So, I mean, the production is not all that great, but McKenzie's involved in this offense. So, I mean, Bills do have the Jets this week, so not the greatest matchup, but I mean, PPR flex play with 6 teams on bye, that could be an option. And they did the Bills schedule does get a little bit easier moving forward in weeks 15, 16. They got the Dolphins and the Bears. So outside of that, I think that's going to take care of my week 14 waiver wire ads. So I hope you guys are still tuning in. I appreciate the support. Remember, like I mentioned earlier, head over to www.247clash.com, referral code North, make a deposit, and, start playing. Maybe if you want to hit me up, ask me some questions, ask me my thoughts about some of these lines. I'd love to dig into them a little bit deeper. So, but like I mentioned before, I appreciate the support from everybody. Check us out on YouTube. Everything will be on the show notes. And we will talk to you all Thursday. Peace.